I'd like to open the floor for some questions. We don't have a flying mic, so you're going to have to just speak loudly. Galia, then the gentleman over there, and you, please. Galia, please.
I have two questions. I mean, one is a very very specific one, and that is Abu Mazen has been saying over and over again he'd like to retire. Clearly, there can't be elections, and so the question is there anything, what is the outlook in terms of possible personnel changes? My other question is on the assumption that you all agree that reconciliation, genuine reconciliation, is not on the cards. You mentioned, Arnon, you mentioned the influence from the region, and Sufian, you mentioned, of course, the power of Egypt and all of this. What is the possibility, or is there a possibility of some kind of a regional approach that would be led by Egypt, obviously, but engaging the Saudis? Is there, again, assuming, of course, nothing comes from Israel, and I think the reason I ask the question is that it is conceivable that this is something the Americans are thinking of a regional approach, some kind of regional approach that will then overlook the issue of reconciliation or bypass it, so to speak, and to try to get something from outside moving.
Let's take another question from
It's a question primarily for Dr. Sufian, but really for anyone on the panel. One thing that came out in what everyone was saying was an analysis of this question with reference to Israel, which is not a surprise. But my question to Dr. Sufian was, within Palestinian politics, is there any room for a discussion regarding the reconciliation or separation without Israel? In the sense that, Israel is not a society under occupation, and even here, last year during the social protests, and every now and again you hear this statement, we're going to look at social issues and we're not going to focus on the conflict. And this is a society not under occupation. I wonder how possible it is for Palestinians to have a discussion about a secular path or a religious path and social issues and economy, with the army outside your door, and talk about other things that are important to Palestinians. I wonder if that's even possible, and how much of a role that plays. That was my question.
Okay, Sufian, let's answer these questions, then we'll take a few additional.
Galia, regarding the first question, sometimes we feel that Abu Mazen really wants to go, wants to leave. And I think 2 months before going to the UN, he was very close, and he actually stopped to participate in the meetings of the Central Committee and the Palestinian leaders, and he told them frankly that I'm going to leave, so please, I'm serious, prepare one, accept me. After the UN, maybe the situation little bit changed. He feels that he can contribute more, but one of the reasons that Abu Mazen actually wants the reconciliation and insisted, first of all, to start with general elections. But one of the main reasons that he wants to leave the position of as a Palestinian Authority leader. I'm not sure about the other positions, but firstly, he wants to begin by leaving Palestinian Authority with elections. So one of the reasons he insisted to have elections, and that the debate with Hamas. Hamas actually, when they're talking about reconciliation, they don't want to start by elections. Abu Mazen wants to start with elections because he wants to leave. If you ask the Palestinians, most of the Palestinians don't believe in that, to be honest with you. But I think always he's repeatedly saying that he wants to leave this position. He fed up. The second thing regarding Egypt and Saudi and the role of the Americans. First of all, we don't know what the Americans actually need or what the Americans want, or if the Palestinian-Israeli issue will be the top of the agenda of the second cadence of President Obama. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what exactly the United States want to do. But it's not depends the Americans, it not depends the Saudian or the Egyptians. Again, President Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhoods in Egypt, the priority of them to stabilize their regime there. Once they're fighting with the other groups, they have no mind for the Palestinians, for the regional role, for any role in the region. And it's very logical. But if they succeeded to stabilize the situation there, I think Egypt will play very, very important role in the region. Egypt of the Muslim Brotherhoods. It's not Egypt of President Mubarak. It's not the same thing. The third question regarding the reconciliation and Israel. We know that for Netanyahu, for the extremist right in Israel, the better situation to keep the Palestinians divided. Gaza separated from the West Bank. Of course, he has at least one of the pretexts that Palestinians not united to talk with who? With Abu Mazen, with how we can talk with Abu Mazen or sign agreement with Abu Mazen when he has no control in Gaza. It's a good pretext for those who don't want to. So if that depends the Israelis, we know that, they will not facilitate elections or reconciliation in West Bank and Gaza. Palestinians are aware for this point, but to be honest, it's not the problem because the position of Israel they are against. Of course, it's important, but we have internal problems more serious than the intervention of Israel. So I cannot only blame Israel. I know what the Israelis want. I know that they don't want us to reconciliate. I know that, but not because that we failed till now to reconciliate.
I want to relate to Egypt in a couple of ways. People told me that when Mahmoud al-Zahar came back from Egypt to Gaza after meeting with President Morsi, he was in such euphoria that he began speaking about the Muslim Brotherhood, the Islamic movement, taking over the whole world, and Israel's days were numbered. It was impending. It was overnight. It was going to happen. That there was no reason for Hamas to compromise at all, not with Abu Mazen and not with Israel. Recognize Israel. People from the international community who met with Zahar felt that they were talking to a man who had completely lost any sense of reality. He was gone, and you know, I don't know how many people saw the press conference that he gave at the end of the war, in which he talked about the successes of Hamas in shooting down 7 Israeli jet fighters, in bombing the Knesset, in sinking an Israeli Navy warship. These were all achievements of the. I asked people who know Zahar, did Zahar actually believe what he was saying? And they told me that he is entirely convinced that this really happened. This is the reality, and this is part of the impact among some of the people within Hamas about the success of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and other places. On the other hand, and this is something that everyone should be very aware of, Hamas and Egypt are on a kind of collision course also. Although this hasn't been stated anywhere publicly, I'm 100% convinced, and I have reasons to be convinced, that there was an Egyptian undertaking to the United States at the end of the war that they were going to stop the smuggling in Gaza, which meant shutting down the tunnels. This is a commitment that the Egyptian government, with Morsi's support behind it, had to undertake in order to prevent the Israeli ground operation and the expansion of the war, and this was the only way that Israel could walk away from the war when it did, knowing that this was an undertaking. The consequences for that, for Egypt and Hamas, is also the opening up and the regulation of the Rafah border crossing that will eventually be not only for people but for goods as well. This is an outcome of it. But there is a clear kind of collision course between Egypt and Hamas, in that Hamas keeps asking Egypt to expand its ability to operate in Egypt, and Egypt refuses. Egypt has given the okay for Abu Mazen to open up a headquarters there. He has his house there and an office there. Khalid Mashal has repeatedly been denied the ability to live in Egypt, to base his operations in Egypt. There were other people who came into Egypt for the negotiations on the ceasefire. None of them were allowed to stay in Egypt. They all had to go back to where they came from, some from Turkey, some from Gaza and other places. The Egyptians are very much controlling, and it's not only the Egyptian mukhabarat, the Egyptian intelligence, they are acting with the outright support of the president. So this is a kind of tension that will continue to exist between Israel and between Egypt and Hamas. Lastly, I had an extraordinary evening when I was in Cairo last month with one of the senior intelligence people who, not acting on his own, engaged me in a conversation of how can Egypt play a role in helping Israel and Abu Mazen negotiate, which I thought was extraordinary and interesting, that they were seeing themselves as a regional player here, not only in the role that it plays in mitigating each time there's some kind of military activity between Israel and Gaza, but they also see a potential role for them to play with regard to negotiations between Israel and Abu Mazen, Israel and the PLO, which also leads us to Jordan, because we all know that King Abdullah has invited Abu Mazen and Netanyahu to come to Jordan in February after the elections, and the Jordanians, King Abdullah and other people in the Jordanian regime, including people in Palestine, have talked about a Jordanian-Palestinian confederation, which in the first state would be the East Bank and the West Bank, not so much Gaza. But this might also be some kind of regional role that should be considered, and I think it comes on the background of the Jordanians' concern with the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan, that they need to consolidate the position of Abu Mazen and the strength of the alliance between the moderates, which is the Hashemite kingdom, and the PLO. And this is also another regional dimension that might be very, very interesting to see how it's going to play out, because it'll be a lot easier for Netanyahu to engage a Jordanian-Palestinian confederation or the idea than just engage the PLO. Still not easy for Netanyahu, but it's a step in a direction that might be easier for Israel to deal with.
Yeah. Regarding the first question, I think that you will not find in any place any statement of Mahmoud Abbas, and I think that not in also in behind closed doors, that he said anything like that he is about to resign. He said that he is not about to present his nomination for election campaign once and when such an election will take place. I think that Sufian is right about that. He's not interested in running again in campaign for chairman of the PA or anything like that. But I think at the same time that he is quite consistent with continuing to hold the authorities of negotiating in the name of Palestinians as the chairman of PLO. So the most probable scenario in this context, I think, will be that if there were elections, he will let somebody else run as head of the PA, but he will keep this position of chairman of PLO. Regarding the second question, I think that when we are talking about regional process, I think that this Saudi Arabia at the moment is not part of this, but due to all the events of the Arab Spring and what each of the Gulf states are doing in this context. But I think that when if we're talking about this at this timing about regional action, the main focus is on Qatar and Turkey and Egypt, and these are the countries that were involved in the diplomatic aftermath of the operation in Gaza. And I think that these countries are now crucial also for what is happening inside Hamas. I think that at the moment, Gershon took Zahar positions and statements in the direction of his conversation with Mursi. I think that it's more that Zahar feels that the only way that he can remain as a viable political figure in Hamas in Gaza is through following the Iranian track inside Hamas. I think that there is a struggle now inside Hamas of to what extent to disconnect from the Iranian. Syria is not part of it, but to what extent to disconnect from Iran. And I think that Zahar is the key guy that is trying to keep that in place, because if it goes further towards the axis that I was describing, it means his political career is about to end, I suspect. The second aspect of this is that if there was a regional enterprise or a regional conference which will be based on these countries, I think that the leverages that will be practiced on Hamas will be unprecedented, and I think that they are in no position to resist or refuse that if actually there was such an axis or there was such a conference. This is why this is the only thing that is new relatively to previous peace process, where the Annapolis or before that, where Hamas basically was torpedoing each and every process that was created. So in this respect, there is an opportunity, and I disagree regarding the operation in Gaza. I don't think that it shattered the moderates. I think I suggest to relate to it to a politics of interests rather than to politics of ideologies. And I think that the position of Hamas to resist the political process after the Gaza operation and after this creation of this axis, which is not connected to the Gaza war, it's connected to regional developments, I think their ability to resist that is much, much more reduced than it was in during most of the last 12 or more years, okay, 15 years. Regarding the, no, that's it.
Thank you. Another round just before that. I think that it's fair to say that Iran's position following the last war has been significantly weakened. I think that Iran wanted to see an Israeli ground incursion into Gaza, which they didn't see. Hamas has been supporting the rebels in Syria, and Iran has been supporting Assad. And just, I think, a week after the war ended, Larijani, the chairman of the Iranian parliament, was denied entry into...
The foreign minister.
I think it was perhaps was denied access into Gaza. Yeah, I think the definitely an interesting access, which seems to be very much along the Sunni Shia lines, and you mentioned Turkey, Egypt, and Hamas on the one side, and Shia Iran on the other. Any other questions, Hillel? And
I'd like to ask Dr. Sufian 2 questions. The first is, following the upgrading of the Palestinian status in the UN, what are the thoughts and plans about how to move further in the international arena following this upgrading? And my second question is about how do you see the future of Fatah? The next generation leadership, the younger generation, Where is Fatah going?
Excuse me, you wanted to ask a question? Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah, there are two. You can
Sorry,
take the
no,
first one and then.
no, but I felt that my question was actually really well.
Okay, very
But I
good.
wanted to, one thing, it was about I believe the Qatari Emir was actually in Gaza lately, right?
He was last 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Right, and I was actually, I just wanted to understand more deeply from, because you gave a pretty good sort of understanding of that, but I'd like to hear from you how you feel a country like Qatar can actually make a difference, because is it just a media thing that it seems a more interesting country all of a sudden, or is money okay, but you know, something like that.
But the rivalry between Egypt and Turkey, perhaps you could address.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Thank you, first of all, to all the panelists. My question's open to the table, but especially, I suppose, Dr. Baskin and to you, Dr. To what extent do you believe that Abu Mazen is actually sincere about wanting to achieve peace with Israelis? If you look at it, I suppose, from the Israeli position, they had the settlement freeze, but they were squandered. They've offered to negotiate, but he's shunned it. Instead of speaking to the Israelis, he looks to be like he's embracing Hamas, and then he's going to the UN and speaking about using the ICC as a catalyst to launch a campaign against Israel. We know what Israel has to do, and we've spoken about that, and making further steps and inroads to say towards in the area of settlements, but it takes two to tango. So what steps do you think that Abu Mazen can or should take to advance the cause of peace from the Palestinian side?
Okay, Gershon, then Sufian, Arnon, and we'll wrap it up.
شكرا. شكرا. First of all, I want to talk about Iran and Hamas and Turkey. I'm not sure that Zahar close to Iran and Ismail Haniyeh close to Turkey or close to Egypt. I'm not sure. Nobody in Hamas believe in Iran. Believe me. I know what they're saying to me in a closed door. Nobody believe in Iran. Nobody trust Iran because Hamas pure Sunni Islamic movement, and Iran it's pure Shia. It's exactly when we're talking about Protestant and Catholic, or it's more than difficult than that even. And believe me, one of the most difficult mission of Hamas in Gaza during the last 5-6 years to block the influence of the Shia in Gaza. And I know how many steps they take in this regard in order to prevent people to be close to the Shia thought. So nobody in Hamas, including Zahar, actually believe in Iran, but from a tactical way, they keep relations with Iran in order to get support, to get weapons. After the Syria, and I think last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, Hamas position regarding the Syrian regime is very, very clear against publicly, especially last 2 days after what happening in Yarmouk refugee camp. So no debate in Hamas regarding this point, in my knowledge, no debate. The second point regarding the future of Fatah. Two problems have Fatah as still the largest movement in Palestine, within the Palestinian people. One, organizer problem. Fatah held the 6th conference 2009. It was a big hope that after this conference and after electing a new leadership, that Fatah will be actually able to rebuild itself from organizing point of view. And unfortunately, we did nothing. In this term, no progress, nothing. It's very sad to say that from Fatah point of view. Many reasons. It's needless to say here in this panel about these problems. The second point is a political one, and that is the most important one. Fatah led the Palestinian people before 1993 as the prominent national movement in Palestine, in all the world, leading the struggle of the Palestinian people. After Oslo, Fatah changed and led the political process and the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians. Once the peace process failed, once Fatah politically failed, till now, it's a very, very problem from the point of view of the Palestinians. So, which means I think we have a lot of debates internally about what to do in this regard. So I agree with Arnon that Abu Mazen tried last 4 years to jump between the 3 or 4 options. That's right, exactly. You read exactly rightly, Tamar. But you cannot jump all the way and all the time. You have to decide what do you want from yourself and what do you want to tell the people. Qatar, I have no explanation, believe me. Maybe the Americans know what exactly the role of Qatar. I have no explanation. And nobody from the Palestinians that I asked him that giving me a logical explanation. Why Qatar doing that? What's exactly the role of Qatar? That the Americans really want Qatar to do this role? To support Hamas, to support the Muslim Brotherhood, and to support the Americans, and to support, I don't know. I have no idea. Abu Mazen, the last question regarding the negotiations and Abu Mazen. I think that Abu Mazen is the last Palestinian leader who still more or less believe in achieving peace by direct negotiations or by negotiations. The last one to be able to do that. The last chance. Abu Mazen, unlike what the Netanyahu and his government try to introduce him, he has a lot of problem within the Palestinians because his political will. Because nobody from the Palestinian side believe now in the way that Abu Mazen leading the Palestinians. In what means, in the main of no violence, only negotiations and negotiations and negotiations. To be honest with you, nobody believes in this way that we can achieve our national goals in this way of Abu Mazen. But he still insisted to prevent any kind of violence. He still continue to find a way how to solve the problem in a political way, still. But he is the last one from all the Palestinians, if we're talking about the old generation, the middle generation, or the young generation. Nobody believe in this way except Abu Mazen. Thank you very much.
I'll just continue with where Sufian left off with Abu Mazen. Is Abu Mazen sincere? You know, when I meet with Abu Mazen and I have talks with Abu Mazen, and I'm amazed each time anew of how committed and dedicated he is to peace with Israel. And it amazes me the Israeli response towards him of not being a partner. We will, and I agree entirely with Sufian, never find a better partner than Abu Mazen to make peace with. Abu Mazen is willing to make acceptable compromises with Israel on every single issue. When Abu Mazen talks about the negotiations that he held with Olmert, and he stresses that the issues, or the issue in conflict that remained open and undecided was not what everyone in Israel claims the issue of Jerusalem and the refugees issue. He said we arrived at solutions for that. There was an argument about specific numbers of refugees that Israel would call family reunification and he would call right of return. There was a gap of numbers, but it was a bridgeable gap. The issue in conflict that was not resolved in those negotiations was on real estate, was on the size of the annexation and the line of the map, and in particular on the issue of Ariel more than anything else. That was the major issue that was left unresolved. And believe me, if it comes to an issue of real estate, and we're dealing with a few percentage points of how much the land is going to be on this map, it's going to go this way or that way, this is bridgeable. Another period of time of sincere negotiations, it would have been reached and there would have been a compromise. And I got news for you also. In my view, at the end of the day, when there is an agreement on all the issues and we're moving toward ratifying that agreement with the publics on both sides, the issue of recognizing Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people, guaranteeing that there be full equal rights for the Palestinian citizens of Israel, will also be bridgeable. This point that the Israelis demand all the time that they don't recognize us, this is ridiculous. Abu Mazen has gone so far in his statements and his readiness to recognize. I can tell you that in one of the last conversations I had with him, I tried to focus with him on how can we convince Netanyahu that you're really serious about this? What is the issue for Netanyahu that's going to do it, other than the issue of recognizing Israel as the Jewish state, which he said he wouldn't give away at the beginning. This is something that could only come at the end of negotiations. But we talked about the security issues. And he said to me that we are ready to accept every single one of Israel's reasonable security demands, and where we have differences, we can find bridgeable solutions with the help of the international community. So that there wasn't a single one of Israel's security demands that were reasonable that he was not willing to. He said we have, and this goes to what Sufian said, I will not allow any terrorism to return as long as I'm in charge. We had a discussion about the Gilad Shalit negotiations, and I asked him if you were in charge then of the Shalit negotiations, how would you have dealt with it? He said something that gave me a chill up my spine. He said to me, if someone in the West Bank kidnaps an Israeli soldier, I will kill him. That's what Abu Mazen said to me. If someone in the West Bank kidnaps an Israeli soldier, kill him. I don't know how you can convince the Israeli public and the Prime Minister that this man is more sincere than that. I think it's such an amazing loss of an opportunity, the old Abba Eban statement. We are losing the opportunity to make peace with the Palestinian people because there will not be someone who we can make a deal with better or more easily than Abu Mazen after Abu Mazen.
First, I don't think that I share the same feeling that nobody in Hamas likes Iran at the moment, okay? And I'm not, I didn't make the division Zahar with Iran and you know, I think that given the situation of elections, or of internal elections that they are now handling for almost a year, I think that each and every leader there is putting his eggs in many baskets, or as many baskets as possible. And I think that Haniyeh was visiting Tehran just like Zahar, and others are doing other things. On the regional level, I think that you can clearly see how Qatar is giving specific shelter to Mashal, not because of his nice eyes or haircut, or they are giving him shelter because they are putting their money on him as the next head of the Politburo. And it's quite clear that, like you said, that they are putting the Egyptians are putting their money on Abu Mazen as head of the Politburo, and the same thing with the Turks that have been hosting El Aruri, not because he's from the West Bank and not from Gaza. They are hosting him because they thought that there is a chance that he will represent the Turkish interests within Hamas in the foreseeable future. So I think that this is what we see now. Once this disputes will be decided inside Hamas, and once there was a new head of the Politburo, you can start thinking of which axis is actually dominant within Hamas, and then we can rediscuss this. But until then, the debate will continue. I think that regarding the intentions of Abu Mazen, I'm not a psychologist, I don't know exactly, but I think that the best way to judge it is through deeds. And basically he was ready to negotiate in any phase between 93 and now, and I don't think that that this will change. On the other hand, I don't think that the two-state solution or the prospects of reaching agreements will die when Abu Mazen will stop being the chairman of the PA or chairman of PLO. I think that this will remain an option even after Abu Mazen, and
more difficult.
Much more difficult. But I think that there will be others that are sharing the same principles. Maybe their tone at the moment and their the level of volume is different. But I think that for many reasons, for the same reasons that Mashal said what he said in the speech in Gaza, or others are giving other interviews. But I think that I don't suggest to relate to it as if this is a lost battle, or that everything will be finished once Abu Mazen will step down. That's it.
Okay, I'd like to thank you all, thank our panelists. I think one thing I take from this is that, again, while Israel sits on the sidelines, nothing remains as it was. Things are very dynamic here, and if the Israeli government, the one that is exiting, and could be the very similar one, will be entering. As I said earlier, it's still 33 days, I think, until the elections, and 33 days, even with the way that we all think that the outcome is, things can change, and things indeed do change. So never a dull moment here. I'd like to thank you for coming to Afternoons with IPCRI. Thank you, Sufian. Thank you, Gershon. Thank you, Arnon. And see you next time.